He is an actor who has shared the screen with Sidney Poitier and Kevin Hart. He's also a former track and field athlete, a musician, an entrepreneur, a diversity, equity, and inclusion speaker, a husband, and the father of three boys. And as if that wasn't enough, he's just put pen to paper in a timely and inspiring new book about how he finds the time to do all this. Here to talk about the art of doing, a guide to getting motivated, getting unstuck, and getting it done, is author Jesse Lipscombe. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
The art of doing, I would say, is part how-to, part memoir, or as you put it, the story of a regular guy who dared to do remarkable things. What made you want to write this book, or was it a case of a publisher or an agent approaching you and saying, "You're a pretty accomplished guy. What's your secret?"
It's funny. It's very meta in a way because over the pandemic, a lot of us had some time on our hands. And for me, like a lot of people, I assume, have said, "Hey, I'd love to write a book one day." And then all of a sudden, I had all this time, and I said to myself, "If I don't do it now, maybe I've been lying to myself. Maybe it's something I didn't want to do." So I ended up writing a book, and it was a fiction book called Jars, sci-fi, about a non-binary recluse with superpowers, and I thought it was amazing. And I said to my speaking agent, "Do you know any book publisher people?" And he connected me with somebody at HarperCollins, and I got a meeting with them. And I flew there, and I brought my manuscript. And then he's like, Jesse, I don't do fiction. I do nonfiction, but I'll pass it along to somebody." He passed it along. They passed on it, said it wasn't good enough. And then I went home and pouted for a bit. And then, luckily enough, they called me back a little bit later and said, "You know what? We researched you a little bit. We think we want to do a nonfiction book with you." So I took a leap on my fiction book, which needed some work, but it ended up producing this opportunity where I got to do this nonfiction one with a major publisher.
Now, the book is timely, given it is landing in bookstores in January, this week, in fact. Are you one for New Year's resolutions?
Um, yes and no. Like I love the idea of setting like a brand new goal at any time. But I also love Mondays in general. So I feel like January is like the biggest Monday. It's just a giant Monday. So you can kind of start over. You can get a clean working slate. And there's nothing wrong with a resolution that you maybe didn't do last year that you could dust off the shelf and redo again with some new tools you learned. So I'm here for them. I like them. I think they put people in a good headspace for sure.
There are many great quotes you have in the book, including this one from Martha Beck. How you do anything is how you do everything. And I think that's a good place to start us off here. How does that particular line resonate with you?
Yeah, for me, it's that idea of like the little things. For me, earlier as an athlete, the idea that I wouldn't try super hard in practice, but when it's time to compete, I'd be able to turn it on. That not being true. That idea of, when it counts, I'll clean my room when I have people coming over. But the truth of the matter is, it's those every small daily habits and practices that actually produce the fruits for later on. Assuming that you can just turn it on like a light switch is usually where a lot of errors happen and where mistakes happen. So it's this idea of like trying to really pay attention to all the little pieces along the way and do them as best I possibly can, just setting myself up for success.
Now, the central philosophy of the book is summed up in three words: action, movement, and momentum. How would you say those terms feed into one another?
This is true. I mean, I heard it right now and I got excited because most of the time we are hesitant to act, hesitant to make that first step. And we tell ourselves millions of reasons why not. And other people might have too. Those negative mind chatter. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I have to learn a bit more, or I need to have more experience here. Once you take that first step, you act, right? Once that happens, then you create some movement. And once movement happens, then the momentum takes over. And that idea, you can think about it if you've worked out ever, like starting to work out, it takes forever. You think about all the reasons that you should go to the gym and you don't go to the gym. Then once you're in the routine, it's almost just as hard to stop. And that's that momentum taking you. And the whole book kind of takes you through different examples of that. But how important it is just to take that first step, not waiting on the motivation, not waiting on whatever, this, that, or the other thing. Making the first step, no matter how ugly and reckless, is the right step to make.
There's lots of little memoir type tidbits in there, and one particular piece of hard-won wisdom that resonated with me is this notion of moving towards the things you love, not running away from the things you fear. And you've listed some examples from your own life in here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I early on in my life, a lot of what I did, even the things that were successful, were a result of running from fear, like fear of disappointing myself, fear of disappointing others, fear of expectations. As an athlete, I was a really good athlete really early, so there was a lot of pressure put on me. Even my grandfather, his name's Rolly Miles, he passed, but he was a Hall of Fame CFL football player. Like the idea of athletics and excelling was always a given. But so for me, there was a high amount of stress I put on myself. And it wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy it as much. I didn't get to sit in any of my wins. It was like, what's next? Because that's expected. But once the switch happened, and the switch for me happened as a result of a medical scare. I had a TIA, a trans ischemic attack, which is like a mini stroke right before the Olympics in Beijing. And that was kind of the end of my track and field career. But it actually gave me this opportunity to look at things through a different lens, a lens of I don't have to do these things. I get to do these things. And I get to do things I love. Let me just point all of my energy towards the stuff I love. And then the journey, every piece along the way becomes really exciting, really enjoyable. And I can sit in it and enjoy it and take it for what it was. It was a great switch for me, and also something that has allowed me to enjoy it, all the good, all the bad, all the little steps along the way.
Now, there's another interesting concept that you explore here as well, this idea of embracing your authentic self as opposed to your representative self in terms of goal setting, in terms of going after what you want, and sort of the dichotomy between yourself that you know and then the version of you that you make for public consumption.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I mean, even it happens all the time. I would say that I consciously in the past used to do that, where I was like, all right, I'm doing an interview right now with John. So I should bring my interview Jesse to the table. And then maybe later on I'm gonna go hang out with my buddy and I'm gonna bring that version. But once I started to allow just Jesse to show up at all the different places, it was much more freeing for me. But also, I felt like the interactions I was having with people became more authentic. It gave people freedom and permission to also do the same thing. It becomes less of a backpack to carry, and quite the opposite. You can kind of just take it off and like, John, this is Jesse. He speaks with his hands and he's pretty jacked up about his book and he's excited about life and he thinks you can literally do anything if you just follow some steps. That's what I bring to the table all the time. And it's nice not to put that away sometimes.
Now, you talk about growing up in St. Albert, Alberta, which was at the time a predominantly white suburb of Edmonton. And when we talk about this dichotomy between your representative self and your authentic self, you also talk about code switching, where a racialized person ditches their colloquial ways of speaking and adopts a whiter vernacular when around white people. Do you find that these two things are related, the code switching and the push and pull between your authentic self and your representative self?
Yeah, I think definitely there's a correlation between the two, specifically like just in the world that we live in. For the majority of people, Black folks, racialized individuals in general, you're living in somewhat of a white world, and there are always consequences and ripple effects to whatever you bring to the table. So if your authentic self, if I'm going to bring my authentic self, I also am aware that that authentic self may cause other people to feel some kind of way. The neat part about that, though, is as I've grown and learned, that's none of my business, And if my authentic self rubs people the wrong way, then I guess that's their thing to deal with. And the more that I can lean into that, again, it's that same idea of not having to carry the weight. Um, and I have to, I'll say, I'll take a step back to you. I say that from a privileged place, right? Because I'm not in a spot where, me being my authentic self at work is causing some uncomfortable places in a place that's not necessarily as open-minded or progressive. I've had many meetings with individuals who can't bring that self to their workplace. It's caused issues, and that's often why I come into those workplaces and do some DEI work with them. But ultimately, if we can take a code switch and throw it in the trash, take your representative and recycle that bad boy, and just show up as we are, it's just a better place for everybody.
I find it's an important topic to bring up because it also feeds into this idea that you introduce of finding your lion, if not only for yourself, slay it for those who are watching you. So, do you feel or have you felt as you've made your way through life that you're not only doing this for you, but you're also showing that it is possible for other people?
Yeah, I think so. And I'll say this as an example for that. Like, I'm 6'4", 260 pounds, right? And so, and 260 pound black man. So that being said, with my size and stature, I feel like I have some freedoms to do certain things that other people might be watching. Like, for example, you can't see me right now, but like the pants I'm wearing right now, they're very Billy Porter. If you don't know, they look like I'm wearing a long skirt, but they're actually just wide leg pants, right? And I'm wearing a fuchsia sweater, and like for me, I will wear these things proudly as a man, and my sons see it and wear it. Of course, they could wear this color, or they could wear that if they wanted to. So in that scenario, me being my authentic self can maybe give other folks say, hey, look, if that like jock looking giant man can do it, so can I. So I think, not just that example alone, but the idea of being that and not knowing who's watching, it's almost like a responsibility, right? Because we don't know who's watching. It's our responsibility to be our authentic selves as confidently as possible, because we might be paving the way for someone else to do the same thing, in the same way that this book might just be something that somebody reads and then they make something that really matters, that really might change the world. Yeah, so I think it's an important thing to do. I say this in the book too. It's simple, but it's not easy. And that's across the board. A lot of the stuff is very simple, but they're not easy. And it's just understanding it'll take hard work, especially when we're kind of reprogramming and rewiring who we are at a core.
Finding passion and living that truth, as you put it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The Art of Doing ends with a workbook section so the reader can put these principles you lay out into action. What do you hope people take away from your book?
Yeah, I mean, my hope is kind of the idea that, yes, it's a regular dude who's doing some extraordinary things, meaning that these dreams and passions that we have are much closer than we think. I think a lot of the time we build this mountain up of how we could achieve some of these things, and a lot of them are so much closer than we've ever anticipated. And then I hope that people take this book and actually use some of the tools to make the things come to fruition. Now, I say that not just because it's amazing for them, but when we have a passion or a talent, I think it's super selfish to keep it to yourself. And I don't think that we have them because they're for us. They're actually for other people. They're like lights, they're beacons. So, for whatever reason you've been drawn to this thing or you're talented at this thing, you should show off so that someone can see you and be like, oh, I could do that too. That person kind of looks like me or walks like me or talks like me. I never thought that I could do something like that. So I hope that like this book gives us the permission to try to do, and then not only that, someone else gets to watch it and do the same thing. And closer, we're living into our truths. We're living into our passions. And I mean, I would bet a lot of money that it'd be just a generally happier place if everybody is just doing the stuff they love to do. Makes sense, right? Simple, but it's not easy.
The name of the book is The Art of Doing, a guide to getting motivated, getting unstuck, and getting it done. It's published by Collins. My thanks to author Jesse Lipscombe.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.